to go to my man, Andrii. Andrii, welcome to the show, man. I haven't seen you in a long time. You doing all right
Hi,
today?
Jamal. Good to see
Um,
you also.
it's good to see you, man. I'm sorry for the delay. I was trying to.
No,
I'm
it was
trying.
interesting. Your speech monologue actually got me thinking a lot of stuff out there. So I was actually very interested in listening to you, and I was ready to listen even more. So no
Oh
problem.
no,
That
I don't
was
want you. No, I
no,
don't want you
no,
to have to
no,
listen no
no,
more. I
no, no,
want you on
no,
for an
no.
interview.
That was good. That
I
was
want you on
good.
for an interview.
That was
Just so
actually
our
got me
listeners.
thinking some stuff. Yeah.
Well, Andrii Telizhenko, he is a Ukrainian whistleblower and a former diplomat. He was there when all of this started. Um, Give me your thoughts on today. I mean, it's a historic day potentially, and maybe that's the question. Do you think it is a historic day, or do you think all of this is a quote unquote trap in the way that some
No,
people said?
no, it is a historical day for a step forward to making peace, and hopefully there will be some steps taken by both sides in the situation. It's a historical day because you have a meeting of the president of the Russian Federation, the president of the United States on Alaska, U.S. territory today, former Russian territory. Historically, it's an interesting piece of land where there's a lot of Orthodox Christians living there. And basically, it's the vibe of the United States and the heartbeat of former Russian empire. So very interesting. And the fact is that here, as we say, we're going to be looking up to what's going to happen. We cannot say one side or another because there's going to be talk between the two presidents. And I've been waiting for this so long. I've been talking about this on your show and different shows that we need a meeting between the two presidents. Only a personal meeting, one on one, for a couple of hours, will get an understanding. Can we end this war, or this will escalate and go somewhere more uglier and further? Because if they can hear each other out, not over the phone, because one thing over the phone, everybody's used to Zoom, phone, everything else. It's not how things are done in the real world. You make a deal personally. You sit down, you talk, you look each other into the eyes, you do a handshake, you feel the vibe of each person in the room, and you talk and you hear each other out. And if this is going to work out, if Putin can reach out to Trump and convince him, and Trump can also from his side convince Putin and then to go one way or another, this is going to be a big thing. We can move forward from this, and I believe so. I don't want to also prognose on this because right now, one thing is to prognose when there's the elites are talking between each other, the ministers, the middleman, everything else. But this is the two leaders, and they have to say to each other one thing and another that we don't know. Like we know what they're going to talk about, but what and how they're going to push this, we're going to see, and the outcome when how long it's going to be this meeting, the minutes and how the mood of the two leaders after they come out of the meeting. And I believe, as we talked about before, that there are things they already agreed upon. I believe that there are things that should be done. I believe personally that because the United States, with under the Biden Obama administration, the neocons started this war using proxy Ukraine, they should end it. And at the same time, Russia is being very modest into letting the United States today save its face, saying, yes, you are today's administration, you are the middleman. You can negotiate between us and Ukraine.
Right.
Let's do that. We will let you, if you want to speak this way, do it for your own sake, but let's finish this. So Russia is moving a lot of things forward, even within the negotiating on Ukraine, but also the deals on the mid-range missiles, which are being talked about, and Putin mentioned those yesterday in Kremlin. That this is a very important thing. The United States actually went out of under the Biden administration on the mid-range missiles, which the United States is right now pushing and imposing, and in the European Union, which are basically there was a deal, a contract after the Soviet Union fell apart with Russia that there's a limit of mid-range level missiles that can put and assemble anywhere else in the world with
Yeah,
tactical
the
nuclear
INF.
warheads.
Yeah.
And the United States left that deal. Russia,
Exactly.
on its hand, for 6 months, even more, actually obeyed the deal, even though it was not even relevant. It was not enacted by the United States. Russia didn't act on it, actually obeyed and didn't persuade us. But this is what they're going to also talk about mid-range level nuclear or tactical missiles, which the United States actually is going to put and is planning to put in the Philippines to target Beijing and China. So this is a long-range variety of talks, not just Ukraine. You have the Arctic, not just the minerals in the Arctic and in that area, but also the Arctic route, which is 9,000 kilometers shorter than you go through the Suez Canal. So, in Russia's ready to open to the world, to have the world use it, having the 25 nuclear icebreakers that in the Russian fleet, US only has two. So this is a lot of stuff that are going to be talked about: economy, nuclear tactical warfare, and arsenals that are basically are mismanaged and that can bring to the brink of World War III, because that is the reality that can change the world. Not in the Ukraine situation, that Ukraine has lost. It's not Ukraine, but the key regime. But the tactical nuclear warheads that are being placed right now and may be placed in the Philippines and may lead to China to freak out and then let's do World War III. China is not going to negotiate like Russia and think about thinking how should we save the world. China's going to act because that's how they do. They're strong in their foreign policy by acting and doing things to undermine the West. So this is a lot of things that are going to be put on the table, and one of them is Ukraine. And the United States is using Ukraine as a trade deal, a card that they know Russia wants it more than anything else. Ukraine is more important to Russia than Iran, than any other deal, because it was part of Russia, it historically is, and so that was taught even in the universities in 20 years ago in Washington that Ukraine cannot be touched by the West. It was always part of Russia. It has to be neutral, no NATO. That's what were things were taught in universities in Washington 20 years ago. And I don't know what changed the last 20 years that people in DC started to think that they can use Ukraine in the situation. So everything's going to be on the table. What are they going to come up with? What is going to be the deal? How the U.S. face is going to be saved in this situation? Because today the reality is going to be how to save the U.S. so they can leave Ukraine alone. That's what I think.
69%. The polling in Ukraine, I think it was a Gallup poll, that says 69% want the war to stop. Basically, make a deal and stop this war. That is an astonishing change. I mean, the numbers were flipped prior compared to what they are now. When you saw the protests that were taking place, did you think those were astroturf? Did you think those were people that were coming out in righteous indignation? Did you think they were both?
But you have to understand the protests in Ukraine at that time. There are people who did come out for their own faith and for their own support and belief that they wanted they're against the Zelensky regime and etc. But the organizers and the coordinators of those protests were supported by the G7 ambassadors.
I see.
And I can tell you a lot of examples why. From my information, I know that. Additionally, so for your logical thinking, and for people just to understand, in the last 3.5 years, the mothers of the dead soldiers could not protest. Anytime they came out on the street anywhere in Ukraine, they were wrapped up by the security service of Ukraine and taken to prisons, and then they were let out, but they were questioned, etc. 30 minutes, the protest never lasted no longer than that, and that is it. The last 3.5 months, these protests were all over Ukraine. They were assembled and coordinated by the G7 ambassadors, the organization of those and the politicians, yes. But the people who came out, a lot of them, I think they are showing that they are against Zelensky, and then there's more people, but they're afraid to come out because they are afraid that somebody's going to come to their door tomorrow and drag them into the prison of the security service of Ukraine and say that they're a Russian spy and give them a life sentence. That's what the head of security service of Ukraine was talking about just yesterday, saying and bragging about how we have political prisoners in Ukraine. By his record, it's more than 3,000. By the record of the United Nations, it's more than 23,000 political prisoners in Ukraine, a so-called democracy of the world. and they're giving them from 15 years to a life sentence just for speaking out against the Zelensky regime. So I think those protests uh, show that there's a possibility of regime change in Ukraine, but only a possibility of regime change if it's going to be guided under the like a coup, as always, guided by the State Department. So we'll see where it would lead. And I think the neocons in Washington are trying to undermine and will try to undermine these peace negotiations by trying to overthrow Zelensky's regime, change for somebody else, more convenient puppet of theirs to continue this war. Yes, they'll try to go with the peace talk again as Zelensky came to power, but then when they come to power, they'll continue this war because, and then they'll have say we'll have a legitimate government in Ukraine or whatever. But they will try to do that kind of maneuver, and I'm afraid of that happening also on the side because the evil is not sleeping. The evil is there, and they're undermining and trying to do something to get the war to continue to make money for themselves. A couple of $1 billion they're making for themselves a month. So that's a good thing for them. $1 billion a month, why not? So that's what they're going to continue to do.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Oh, I got to come back to that. I'm glad you mentioned that. Because, yeah, you're talking about this idea where they were taking, I think it was like $5 million a
50,
week and shipping it to the bank accounts in the
50,
UAE.
50.
50
I've been
million.
talking about the OE a lot. I think did I mention on the show, but on other shows I did mention a couple of months ago. But the to look into the OAE because I know there's a RICO case in the United States on Zelensky regime and his surrounding. And I know that the money was going from Kiev to OAE and then to Western Europe. And I've been talking about that for months and months, saying, look into OAE, wink, wink, the FBI or whatever who's investigating this. Look into what's happened from OAE in Ukraine and people involved in this and oligarchs from Ukraine involved in this. Mindich, Butkevich, Lyovichkin, and people from Zelensky surrounding. And it got published recently that they are one of the money transfers they locked in was the Turkish paper published at OEE and then the French into the French banks. So this is what the reality is. So I've been talking about this for months and months, and now hopefully things are trying to unravel through the press and authorities that this is really happening. And I think the numbers there are just the first figures. There's more. There's billions of dollars of being transferred and laundered from Ukraine, and we're transferring from Ukraine, outside of Ukraine, to Western banks, and then not just to Zelensky's pocket, but to the owners of Zelensky, who are the deep state, the Democratic Party, Macron, Starmer, Adam Schiff, Newland, Hillary Clinton, Obama, whatever you call those. Those are the people who are making money on it.
I'm curious on something else. You mentioned, so apparently there is a suspicious looking old woman that has been found in the Alaskan airport that the police have stopped and is questioning. Now, we don't know who this old woman is. He's looking very suspicious. Just pointing it out, right? How it's wild to me when Zelensky comes out and he's like, I'm not doing land swaps. I'm not doing, I'm not leaving the Donbass. I want $1 trillion from Vladimir Putin. I have a lot of coke to buy. I need $1 trillion. And I need these security guarantees. Like he's making all of these demands as if he's not a proxy. Now, you point out that you're concerned that, let's say, the deep state may overthrow the government to get rid of Zelensky, to put in somebody who's more of a hardliner. But all of these people are effectively equal, right? I mean, all of these people are coming from the same political party. Either Nazis, or let's say people on that political side of the spectrum, on the hard right.
They're all owned by the same people in Washington.
Exactly. And so what does it matter if it's Zelensky or somebody else? How does either the Zelensky or somebody else tell Trump, no, I'm not doing this? If Trump comes up with a deal, Trump says, all right, I got a deal. I think this is fair. I think this is legit. And he goes to Zelensky and say, hey, Zelensky, or some rando, whoever you want to put. Hey, Zelensky, I think this is a great deal. And Zelensky says, no, I'm not doing that. And Trump says, okay, I'm walking. You guys are all miserable people. I'm out. That is a worst
They,
case scenario for Europe and Ukraine. How would they effectively tell Trump no if Trump actually gets a deal that Trump wants, like a ceasefire that he's okay
they're,
with?
they're trying to sell the situation, not just to Trump, but to the public in Europe, to prolong this war, to get the financing. So with the change of the face, which is going to be the same body, the same mindset to continue this war, they're going to do like a PR image change, like with an image of Pepsi. They changed the same brand. The logo has changed, but everything else the same. And they're going to try to sell that to Trump and say, oh, he has the support of the people. Zelensky didn't, you know that, but this guy has, he had all these military and the people backing up. We cannot go against them. So they're going to try to prolong this for a couple of months or whatever they need to make more money on this, or to try to sabotage this and get to hold on to the U.S. elections in Congress. Hopefully, they're thinking the neocons and the liberals and Democrats are thinking they're going to win and have the majority, and then they can have a make a fuss with Trump and saying we have a new regime in Kiev. Let's work with them. They have more support. That's what they're holding. They need time for the U.S. elections to Congress, which they think they can get the majority back from the Republicans and get basically try to push Trump in using Congress in that situation. So that's what it's at this time. They don't have the time. Putin has time. Trump doesn't have that much time. They think they don't have at all time at all. These guys are like done. They're lost. The Kiev regime lost in the situation. They cannot give out anything, any proposals or any saying no because they're the losing side. The losing side doesn't dictate their doesn't dictate anything at all in this situation, especially being a proxy losing side. So this what they're trying to do: change the image, change the brand, continue this whole situation, saying show that this guy has the new support, whatever Poroshenko is going to be, or some general or Zelensky or any other party. But this is what the British are behind this whole situation. The MI6 is behind this, and I know from fact, and I've been talking also about this, that there are several military intelligence units in Western Ukraine, Chernobyl and Khmelnytsky, that are coordinating with the Baltic states with the British, and they're ready to go on Kiev to overthrow Zelensky when needed to change this whole situation. They don't care. Like these people on the ground in Ukraine, they all been given European or British passports from the military side. They overthrow, they leave Ukraine. So they don't care what's going to happen there next. But the people who are puppeteering the situation, they need time to continue this war.
I know, but that doesn't they're desperate. So I'm not
Yes,
saying they're
they're
wrong.
desperate. So that's the problem. When a rat is in a hole, or you put the rat right in the corner, it's going to bite even thing which is 10 times bigger than itself. They're ready to fight back. They're like a rat in a hole in the corner, trying to bite anything that goes against them. If Trump makes a deal, he goes away from Ukraine. They'll try to push this through on Congress if they try to win it, or to the Europeans, and try to continue this war as long as possible, even a guerrilla warfare from Europe. For the financing that Europe can get, they cannot give $300 billion to Ukraine anymore. Maximum $1 billion a year. A war costs $1 billion a month for Russia.
Yeah, because
The Ukraine
that's what
cannot withstand that kind of. So it's going to be a guerrilla warfare. That's what they're going to try to push into. But even then, they're going to try to fight, try to undermine for Russia, so Russia will have problems in Ukraine, and Russia cannot start rebuilding Ukraine and show a picture that because if Russia will have Ukraine's territory or Kiev will be under Moscow, under the Russian world plan, and Kiev was always there for thousands of years, and Kiev is going to come back, and there's going to be some image change, and there's going to be better. People are going to start living better. They don't want that. They want just to make things worse. They don't care about the people. They don't care about Russians. They don't care about Ukrainians. They just want things to rot in that area to show, oh, look how bad it is, and make problems for the Russian Federation. That is it.
But the problem they have is that even if you get rid of Zelensky, the 69% wasn't an evaluation of Zelensky. It was an evaluation of the war. There's a
Yeah.
difference in those things. Even if we put in Zelensky, it's not like, all right, guys, I'm here. Let's continue the war. And the audience, the public is like, hey, we have a new guy. Let's continue the war. It's not that. Like
That
we want this
I
to
know.
stop.
For Ukrainians, it's always the West has always counted Ukrainians as a testing site for their own propaganda. So they think and they believe with the change we will face and a new maneuver of trying to change the political reality in Ukraine, the people will start supporting this guy more and because trusting him more and believe that this can bring them victory or better peace deals or whatever. So this is what we try to push, and we're going to try to push in the Ukrainian society through the propaganda they have within Ukraine, because everything is owned by the government. Basically, Telegram channels are being blocked in Ukraine. YouTube channels are being blocked in Ukraine. My Facebook page, by the order of the security service of Ukraine, to Facebook, an American website owned in California by Zuckerberg, wrote a letter to block my Facebook page on Ukrainian territory. So people in Ukraine, 90% cannot see my Facebook page, even though I had like 40,000 followers before. So this is like what they're doing, and this is how they can manage and micromanage the situation. Oh, they're not going to win. They don't want to do this to win or to do something. They are doing this to try to bite Russia a bit and make money on this. A couple of months more, it's a couple more $1 billion. Why not? They don't care about the lives or how many people are going to die. If they did care about the lives, they would have stopped this in Minsk 1. And Ukraine could have had Donbass as an autonomy, this would be over with. We would live without no war. But no, they continue. They continue. 40,000 dead in Donbass from the by the Ukrainian army. This is what happened. 40,000 altogether with the military and civilians. More than 2,000 kids dead in Donbass by the hands of the Ukrainian military. That's what the reality is. And they didn't care. They continued this war. They could have stopped it. They continued this. And now we have more and more bloodbath in that region. So this is what the deep state is planning. This is what they're trying to undermine these peace negotiations, because they know these peace negotiations can work out. They know that Trump and the United States cannot afford this war with the $37 trillion debt, which you mentioned before. They know that because the missiles and the military equipment they have in the United States, they cannot send it more out to Europe and Ukraine. Even what Europe can buy from the United States to sell to Ukraine and to give to Ukraine, it has to be put on a waiting list for a couple of years to manufacture those military equipment and missiles, artillery shells. Sorry, not missiles, artillery shells. So this is what the reality is. And the West cannot protect itself. That's what they need to change and go out of this war in Ukraine. And that's what some of the analytical reports I've been talking about were given to Trump in March and February of 2025. That the longer he stays in Ukraine, the harder is going to be a hit for the United States when it comes out. So he needs to come out fast. And Russia is helping the United States to come out of the Ukraine conflict as easy as possible right now, while the United States is still agreeing on the terms, but on both equal terms Russia and the United States proposed on the table. As soon as Trump goes out of those proposals and says, no, I want it my way, if he's going to be convinced by the neocons and people like Rubio by his side that, no, we have to continue this war, or at least not agree to the Russian terms because it's going to show weakness, then Russia's going to turn away and say, look, we help you, try to help you, but now you're part of the problem. You are part of this conflict. So let's start dealing from the other way around. But hopefully it doesn't go that way. Hopefully they will make an agreement. And so starting from the tactical nuclear missiles, ending with the conflict in Ukraine, make money, not war. That's the real game in the situation. And that's what the United States can actually do.
Say, for example, you're right, and that they actually do come up with some kind of agreement, whatever that agreement is. Zelensky at this point has been screaming, I'm not accepting land swaps. I'm not leaving the Donbass. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. What do you think is in his mind? I mean, you've met him prior. Like, I know you're not close, but you've met him. Like, my hypothesis is that Zelensky is stuck with his own reality. And that reality is, I'm surrounded by a bunch of banderites. And any deal that I sign is going to be the deal or my last signing of anything. So regardless of the Ukrainian people, I've made this argument that Zelensky, every grandma, every grandpa, every child, every random person that Zelensky throws into a Russian wood chipper is 1 hour of life longer that he has in his mind because the moment that he has to sign anything is the moment that his either political life, his actual life, is over with. Meaning Zelensky is either going to end up dead in jail or fleeing to Paris in some villa. Like, he knows it, which means any incentive in the world or everything that's taken place in the world in regards to Ukraine and the number of people that are dying matters less than his own life because he doesn't have a future. Is that how you see it? I mean, because otherwise, this is not necessarily the greatest of situations. And any schoolboy can look at what's taking place on the battlefield and say, hey, you're losing. Your people are being killed. The speed at which Russia is advancing is increasing. Give me your
But
take on that.
that's
What do you think is in his mind in this?
but the death toll is over 1.5 million Ukrainian soldiers.
Yes.
1.5 million Ukrainian soldiers. The Russian death toll is less, much less than that.
I thought it was
We
like
can even see
150,000 or 105, like 1.5
it's
million.
it's
I'm sorry,
around it's under 300,000
150,000.
overall.
Yeah.
So under 300,000 overall. So even with the exchange rate of the bodies compared how much Ukraine is giving to Russia and Russia is giving to Ukraine, we can
Right.
calculate this middle term. What is that? 5,000 compared to 64.
Yeah.
That's already a close. You close that gate already, and you don't even talk about it. So Zelensky is a bully. Zelensky is a drug addict, a bully and a drug addict who actually thinks that mm, he can win this or he has the power to continue this in any terms, and he can sell out anything he can to the West. He's ready to
Wait. I'm
sell
sorry
out
to interrupt you.
anything.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You really think that he thinks he can still win this?
Yes, that's what he thinks. He can, but for himself, not Russia, but for himself, to stay
Oh,
in
okay.
power
I'm sorry.
longer, because his life, as you said before, depends on him staying in power.
Right.
Every Ukrainian dies. When the Ukrainian dies on the battlefield, it's a one more day for Zelensky to be in power.
Right.
That's the reality, and he doesn't care about them. He's ready to sell out to the West everything he can to stay in power. To say, "I'm your guy. I'm ready to be your guy. Whatever you need me, rape me if needed, but I'm going to be here because I know I'm going to die if this changes." The Banderites, the Nazis around him, are controlled by the CIA. They are there to control him and to control the so-called political situation in Ukraine. And so his way out was not to start this war. When he started this war, because he signed his basically himself a death ticket one way, because he could have not won Russia in this situation. What they wanted from the deep state by winning Russia is to having a protest in Russia to try to topple the Putin government, which has full support of the Russian people, as we saw with the elections happening in Russia. Ukraine didn't have elections, Russia did, and Putin won again. Ukraine didn't have elections because even with the dictatorship Ukraine had on its territory, they could not have won this war because everybody understood Zelensky would not be the winner. So Zelensky right now has no way out. He will fight to his death or until he flees the country. I think he's going to flee to London because that's where he has. He's a citizen of London, of Great Britain, together with Yermak. Yermak is feeding him false information to Zelensky that there's still possibilities. Yermak is traveling around the globe and trying to talk to lobbyists in Washington and London to try to push and continue this warfare because that's what they need. But as soon as Zelensky is going to break, and there's already talks that a lot of people from Zelensky's surroundings like the Shafir brothers, who are also the pockets and the money launderers for Zelensky's money, have left Ukraine. Mindich, one of the oligarchs in Ukraine, who was close to Zelensky, who was investigated by the NABU, has fled Ukraine with his money. Those talks, I don't know if that's true, but I'm just saying that's what I'm emphasizing. And there's talks, but that's true. Zelensky's days are numbered. And as soon as his days are done, Yermak is going to be the first one who's going to flee Ukraine. And we're seeing Yermak trying to get close to Zelensky right now to try to, if there's going to be a coup and a regime change, Yermak will be also together with Zelensky because Yermak is an MI6 agent, not a real agent, but he's like
I know what you
he
mean.
works for them. Yeah, he's an asset, an informant, but he has a British passport also. So they are owned by the British intelligence and the deep state, the West, because the deep state has right now from Washington moved to London and to Paris. And because Trump is in power, they're afraid of retaliation against him because the truth is coming out in Washington, that's a separate story. But so this is what the reality is. And Yermak is going to change his size really fast. He's the one who's feeding Zelensky lies. He's the one who's feeding Zelensky the cocaine. He's the one who's feeding Zelensky up for meetings after the coke. And yeah, he's the one actually giving him the IV, keeping him ready for the meetings. So he's there for him, and Zelensky trusts him so bad that he actually is going to lose, and he lost already because he doesn't have the right information, and he's being fed lies on the new situation, on what's happening on the ground in Ukraine, on the international arena, and he's being fed lies that he can actually win the situation over Trump and hold on until the Congress elections in next year in the United States, and then he can come back as a victory guy with the Democrats in Congress trying to wave the U.S. flag in the Capitol Hill or the Ukrainian flag or whatever he's going to wave. So this is how he sees the picture, and he hates Trump for this because he understands that his life is done because the truth and people who want peace have come to power.
Hmm. Cocaine's a hell of a drug, man. Cocaine's a hell of a drug. Um, I'm curious on something else
Don't
because
do drugs, people. Don't do drugs because you're going to lose your mind over this.
it's the type of drug. The type of drug. Cocaine is just, from my understanding, it's the Rick James thing, right? Rick James is like cocaine is a hell of a drug. Um, I'm curious on you and your thinking, just as a Ukrainian. I mean, you have to. I had a conversation with a woman from Lebanon the other day. It was rough because I know that my government was directly responsible for the situation that she's in. I mean, when somebody's telling you, you guys have blown up my house, it's like, oh, geez, my tax dollars went for that. That's rough. Like, that's for the longest time, even on the radio show, I used to say, what was this for? At some point, that question is going to have to be asked in Ukraine. There's a reckoning that's going to have to take place. As a Ukrainian, knowing that Europe, this is going to sound weird, but as somebody who worked for Sputnik at one point, and as somebody who often gets considered where he's just pushing for the Russians, I would argue that I was more in Ukraine's camp than Ukraine was, and that many people in Europe and many people in America. And the reason why I say that is I kept thinking this was a catastrophe. The notion that the United States knocks over a government and then turns it into a battering ram is outrageous. Like it's mind blowing that all of these people died for what? For geopolitical expansion, and that my country was a country that was effectively giving money, weapons to banderites in order to kill Russians in one sense, but get their own people killed in another sense, in a war that, if I'm being very honest with you, in some of the reporting, like some of the documentation about extending or overextending Russia, they never believed Ukraine could win. They just wanted to sap Russia of its strength, overextend Russia, keep them out of other theaters, meaning they use Ukraine as a proxy, as a battering ram, as a patsy of sorts, leading them down the primrose path, I think Mearsheimer would say. I find that to be disgusting. I find it to even be evil in the most harshest of terms. As a Ukrainian, knowing that, and you're looking at Europe saying, keep fighting, keep fighting. We're going to overthrow the government if we need to, with 69% of the public saying, we want to stop this war. We don't care what the public thinks. We need Ukraine to keep fighting. These are not people who care about Ukraine if they're doing that, right? What do you think as a Ukrainian, knowing that they're doing this, that all of Europe is waving a Ukrainian flag while simultaneously trying to get kids thrown into the fight, grandpas thrown into the fight. I mean, elderly, meaning people out of convalescent homes, thrown into the wood chipper. They are effectively want this war to continue. They don't care how many Ukrainians get killed. They just want it to continue. What does it make you think when you're seeing these people waving the yellow and blue flag, acting as if we're allies, we're on your side, we're backing you, we just need you to keep fighting?
They're hypocrites and evil because they're using the pride of the Ukrainians they built up over the 10 years, the Nazi pride uh, within they built into the Ukrainians, even though Ukrainians don't understand that, into them that saying, "Oh, we are Ukraine, we can do whatever we want," and in using that to go against and fight against Russia. As one of the former kings, we can say, of the Rus talked about, Alexander Nevsky, as uh, we have to build our fortresses in the west and build our alliances in the east. I think that's the new policy for Ukraine in the future, whatever Ukraine is going to be left of.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we have to acknowledge and work on that because as 1,000 years ago, the same policy and the same agenda is there from the West to destroy the Rus, the Russian world, and it is the Russian world because Ukraine, even the old books, what the territories of Ukraine today are called Ruskaya Zemlya, Russian land. That's how the kings and the leaders of the Rus talked about that land, Russian, Ruskaya. And so it is all Russian land. It's all the Russian world plan, and you cannot go into that and try to undermine what is happening. We learned our lessons. We we understand who the West is. I think hopefully a lot of people in Eastern Europe and Ukraine and the whole world understands who in the West who is who. It angers me, but there's nothing else we cannot be like them and go and fight and start a war because of what they did and destroy their land. We will have that into our mindset. We will understand that this is what happened. We will learn our history lessons again, which we did not learn from 100 years ago, when in the beginning of the 20th century, where Ukraine also uh, the territories of Ukraine under the Russian Empire got gained its independence for 4 years, so-called independence. There's Western Ukraine, Central Ukraine, UNR, and they fought the Red Army under the guidance of the French and the British and the Americans and the Poles, and they pushed this idea of a free Ukraine, even though it lost and was a catastrophe because they had the same aggression towards anybody who's speaking Russian. 100 years ago, they did the same thing in Ukraine. Nobody learned its history lesson. Again, it was the West. And when they left Ukraine, hunger came because they took all the animals, all the grain, everything Ukrainian farmers had as payment for their support, and left Ukraine dry. And that's when the first famine in Ukraine happened in the beginning of 1922. So Ukraine lived through this, and hopefully, again, we will live through this. We will survive. We will be part of or work together with Moscow, Minsk, our brothers around us, peacefully, and then learn our lesson what the West is, and not forget about it. Again, we will not go to war against them. I do not like what the people are doing, who are in the West, wearing the Ukrainian flag or is pushing Ukrainians into the fight.
Mhm.
The people in Ukraine will have to, Zelensky and his counterparts and everybody else around him will have to face a court one way or another in front of the Ukrainian people for killing over 1.5 million Ukrainians and for destroying the country. The people in the West, it's on their soul and what they believe in. It's gonna be on them. But we will understand who they are, and we will have our international policy compared when Ukraine is going to be free and sovereign on what the policies of the West did to Ukraine. But we will not go to war together. We will not hate them because we're Christians. We will live with them, and that's how I see it. Even though I had to flee my country, I lost. Not only I was sanctioned by the deep state in Washington, where I grew up in Canada, and United States. I cannot go to those countries. My homeland was taken away from me not because of the war, but because I was going to get killed by the Nazis for speaking about peace with Russia. Even then, I don't have hatred toward them. We will build a country, we will build our policy toward the West the way they did to us. But we will work together on the interests of Ukrainians now, or the land that we're going to be living in our interest, not how they will, and they'll never try to overthrow us or overseek us again. That's how what I can bring into the situation and how I see it. I don't know how other people see it. Maybe there's going to be somebody who's going to be more aggressive, somebody less aggressive, somebody maybe pessimistic about everything else. But this is how I see it. I don't have any aggression towards them. I just have pity for what they're going to do to their own countries after they're going to lose Ukraine and hope thank God they're going to lose Ukraine from their hands, these evil deep staters. What they're going to do to their own people inside the country, because when their focus is going to be changed towards them, people in America, in Europe, what they did, if they did to us, this to us, they don't care about the people living in Germany, or France, or Great Britain, or the United States. These deep staters hate their own, the gut of the people who actually are living there, because they're the elites of the world. They're not. They're evil.
Are you still in contact with people in Ukraine? Do you know whether or not they, one, I hate Nazis. I don't have pity for Nazis. I hate Nazis. I have no issue saying it. Two, do the people in the Ukraine, who do they blame for this? Like, how do they see it? I know you said there's a huge amount of propaganda. And by the way, the Ukrainian woman who they got rid of her account, I don't know if you saw that. She had a YouTube account of over 2 million people.
Yeah.
They got rid of it. Yeah, I just up in smoke. And so the point that you're making about they believe that they can use propaganda to smooth over pretty much everything. They're trying to get rid of effectively media sources that contradict any sort of narrative in Ukraine. But as you point out, the moms that have lost their kids, the people who are being sent to the military, the bodies that are returned that they don't want to pay benefits for, and so they act as if they've gone AWOL. That stuff has to burn, especially when they see the West waving flags. Who do they blame for this? Do they
The
say
West.
it's the Russians' fault? Do they?
Now more and more the West. It's between Russia and the West, but it's leaning more that the West got Ukraine involved in this. That we lived a better life together with having with Russia on our side, being part of Russia. A lot of families are living in between Russia and Ukraine because we were all one country 35 years ago.
Right.
For as part of the Soviet Union, and before we were part of the Russian Empire, and before we were part of one nation living with one church, and before we were part of one Kiev Rus, and the Rus which basically thrived and got the land where we are seeing today. So we were all part of this whole the Russian land, the Ruska is in there. We were part of this. We were part of the Orthodox Church, one church for thousands of years. We're having our patriarch in Moscow. We lived together. Ukraine was a land where everybody wanted to come, not only from around the globe, but from the post-Soviet countries. It was one of the thriving countries in the Soviet world, where everybody came to relax, the Black Sea to the Azov Sea, to see their family, to the villages, to get good products, good bread, good meat, because it was basically the basket, not only for Europe, but for the post-Soviet countries. And the hard-loving and hardworking Ukrainians were always welcoming everybody.
Yeah.
This is what Ukraine was. And we had everything. We had our development of missiles, we had development of tanks, satellites, one of the largest planes in the world, one of the strongest military. We had more than 1,500 air defense systems. 1,500 under the Soviet times were protecting Ukraine. Now we have 8 given by the West. And I think out of those 8, 4 are not workable anymore. So this is what the reality has become. In Ukraine, become the hatred. So people know and trying to understand. So they are moving right now that they're hating the West and the Westerners more and more. Not just because the West stopped giving money, but because they're understanding that the West got them involved in this. People understand who got them involved, give them a promise that they will be pushing this until the end, the West. The West was the one who pushed Ukraine into this war. And people are trying to understand and getting to understand this more and more. And that's why I'm talking to people on the ground in Ukraine, and even the military. The military who are in the front lines know this, and they're talking about this. And I can tell you, I was reached out just recently. I was shocked by a couple of the radicals who I knew as normal people long time before, but they became part of the Azov battalion. And they reached out to me, even though they hated me and wanted to kill me 4 years ago. They said we have to flee Ukraine because we understand we lost. Our families are selling our real estate around Ukraine, what we have, and we're going to try to flee Ukraine with all our family because we understand we lost. It's done. This is the Azov battalion.
Okay,
so this is the reality of the ground.
You got to explain this part. You said they were normal at one point.
But I'm saying 10 years ago, yeah, I knew these
So
people from a long time ago, and then they became part of the Azov battalion after the coup, and were basically one of the coordinators within the Azov battalion. I stopped talking to them, and then they even threatened my life when the war started, the conflict started, because it was for peace. And just recently, probably 2 days ago, they reached out to me saying, "We will have to. You were right, Andrei. We have to flee, and we're selling our real estate. Our family's selling everything we have, like our apartment, our house in Ukraine, to get the money we can get, the cash, to flee Ukraine and start a new life because we lost. It's over."
I, I get that part. It's the okay. What I'm trying to get an understanding of is these were normal people, quote
Yes.
unquote, at one point. And somewhere along the way, after the coup, they became Banderites, effectively Nazis.
Yes.
How does that happen? Like, how does that transition to Bob Cobb is a grocer and a teacher to Bob Cobb wants to kill people? I hope that makes
Propaganda.
sense. I'm not trying to,
Yes.
but
Propaganda. They believed in the propaganda that the people in eastern Ukraine were evil and bad, and they are low life, that they have to be killed because of their position of being liking Russia. They got to believe that they have the right to kill those people because they are on the Ukrainian side and are supported by the West, and that's why they went that side. That's from my understanding how they
that's a hell of a
transitioned.
change. I mean,
It
like,
is a lot of
like
people. I can tell you a lot of my family members who I would have never thought would be Banderites or Nazis. They became Banderites or Nazis with the belief through propaganda, believing so much BS on the internet and what they saw, and believing that all that stuff. I'm saying BS, like real BS on the internet. Like the really bad propaganda you can find on the internet when they're showing Ukrainian plane hitting within Ukraine, and let's say it's a Russian plane hitting Ukraine, like that kind of stuff. Like you can check it out, but they still believe it, and they became pro-Nazi, Nazi, supporting Bandera, supporting the other church, because they were put into the mindset to believe that they are the priority in Ukraine. They are the best ones in Ukraine because this is how Ukraine should be. And this is family members that I do not talk to, and very close family members. I can tell you that, which for me it's a shocking revelation when I found out that these people who became like this. And I'm not shocked about these people who like were friends of mine a long time before. Like they were grown ups, just they're living their own life. And I know that they changed, and they also went there in there for some money, not just propaganda. They got the propaganda, but then they went in for the money also because they made money on killing people in Eastern Ukraine and robbing them. That's how they made some of them made their fortunes, and that's why they're driving their Mercedes. You can see all these banderites and elite soldiers from Azov wearing Rolexes, driving a Mercedes. They're doing this not just because they're selling weapons, they're selling bodies, they're selling people's lives, they're basically fighting a war and stealing from people valuables, selling that, making money on everything they can, and that's who they have become. Rich so-called soldiers, which now they have to flee Ukraine, and they're talking about this. Even if they're talking about this to me, then that's something's happening on the ground, which we may see develop. That's what I'm talking about, a coup in Ukraine. That's what I'm talking about, that the West has lost it, and they're ready to do anything they can to try to hold this war a bit longer.
they weren't like this before at all. Like they didn't
No,
harbor, as far as you know, they didn't harbor
no,
any
no,
hatreds. They didn't
no,
hate
no.
Eastern Ukraine. They didn't
Actually,
hate.
they were Russian speaking people who have their families living in Russia, and they basically just switched, saying, "No, we are the elite nation. The Russians are not," and that's how they started to believe themselves. They liked the idea of being the elite nation. This is what Nazism is:
That is very.
believing that you are an elite and giving
I
you
know,
the glorifying you, putting you up higher than some other nation, and believe that you can do whatever you want to the other nations because they are not elite.
I know, but that's very disturbing to me.
It is, and
Because
I've been seeing this a lot around myself in Ukraine, and I said a lot of sane people went this way. Even people with money went this way, and I said a lot of family members who I also knew went this way. For me, it was very disturbing watching this unravel. And at the beginning, I hated them because for doing this. Now I just pity them and pray for their souls because it's not. This is just crazy what
I,
propaganda machine can do.
just to be clear, I put this in an American context where I have a teacher. The teacher seems to be very nice, very kind to pretty much everybody. Sweetest guy, sweetest woman. The country is overthrown, and then in 10 years, he wants to kill my guts because I'm black, or he wants to go after somebody because they're Asian, or they want to go after somebody because they're Hispanic. That is terrifying that people who, under normal circumstances, you think this is just a regular, whatever that means, person, to I'm a fire breathing Nazi who's robbing people and selling guns and getting off on killing some other demographic. And that changeover happens within a decade. That's that is terrifying, man. Can I ask you one more question?
That's why Russia is talking about denazification. That is
Yeah,
true to the ground of it, and that's what has to be done. Ukraine cannot be left the way it is right now because it's going to be a tumor
but how
in
do
the
you do
heart of
that?
Europe.
How do you denazify
You
a
have
country?
these. First of all, it's been because a lot of these Azov battalion guys were killed in the first year of the war, which is already a lot. And then the second part is they lose, they go from power. The West stops supporting these radical groups within Ukraine, the CIA, the counterintelligence, the elite Ukraine. These guys flee to the origins of the people who made them, America, Europe. That's where they're going to go. They're going to go there. Where else do you think they're going to go? Russia? No. They're going to go to Europe and the United States. And that's what's going to happen. I think that's the reality of what they need to be cleaned out of my country. But there, when they come to Europe and the United States, there will be nobody because they have no coordination. They're not coordinated by anybody. So they're just gonna start living their little lives as Nazis did after World War II. You never knew what was going to be living by your side one day. You had
No,
the brother of Adolf Hitler lived in Ohio, in Cleveland. Nobody knew that was that
I
who
don't.
lived by their side.
I don't think so, Andre. I think those people are going to go to Europe and they're going to be very pissed off, and they're going to say that Europe and America didn't support them to the hilt. They're going to have a stab in the back myth, and you're going to see bombings, shootings. You're going to see all sorts of stuff. That's
That's I didn't want to even mention that because that's the scariest part. I was hoping that I have hopes that maybe somebody will just shut up and live their lives, and then maybe one day they'll be prosecuted for what they did. I don't know how. Like for the reality, you take all these people as they did during the Soviet times, take them, put the wall into the wall or to a prison cell, but that's you have to take a lot of people, and that's going to be hundreds of thousands of people are going to just go to prison, and there's going to be the cry of the West saying, "Oh, what are you doing? There's no democracy in this country." But that's the reality how you have to treat Nazism and put these all people to a wall or send them to prison cells for life sentences. But that's, as I said, where is the time, where's the blindfold of this whole situation? What is the wall, where's this break, where does it go, where does it narrow in between dictatorship and total destruction? Russia
Mhm.
did from its whole part, it begged for the West to stop doing this. So
Yeah,
we will see what is the total denazification. But for me, the denazification, these people leave my land, leave my Kiev, my Ukraine, my normal country, stop this war, have the U.S. stop financing, coordinating these radical groups, and have the U.S. clean up the garbage behind itself. I don't know where they're going to throw it. Throw it out somewhere else, but not in the U.S., not in Europe. But just leave my country. They made this. Let them clean up the garbage themselves because it has to end really fast. Because if it doesn't end, there's going to be a lot of more bloodshed. A lot of people are more going to die, and nobody wants that. I know that Russia does not want that for sure. Because if they wanted that, look at Gaza. It would
yeah,
be total. This Ukraine and Kiev would be. You wipe out Kiev, it would be done within a day. Nobody did that. Russians were outside of Kiev. They didn't do that. They didn't shoot Kiev down. They didn't destroy Kiev because nobody wanted the total destruction of Ukraine. Nobody wanted this war to start. and that's what people want, and Putin wants this war to end.
One last question before I let you go. You mentioned this earlier, and I'm sorry, I'm keeping you long because today's
No.
potentially a special day, and I'm very interested in your point of view as a diplomat that was there, and B, a Ukrainian, just in general, talking about his country. This scandal, you mentioned it. He won't run away from the light. We revealed the secret calculation. Zelensky hose. That sounds bad. Zelensky's hose leads to the UAE. Okay, this may be translated, and so maybe the language is a little tortured. But the link newspaper exposed UAE component of the corruption scandal that rocked Ukraine. Zelensky sabotaged investigations and threatened Kiev, prompting a harsh reaction from the public and the EU. However, the refusal to reveal certain information is so crucial that Zelensky may abandon the EU and NATO, for which he led the country to war. That is funny to me that Turkey's newspaper is effectively blaming him for the war. But beyond that point, this is going into this notion of the amount of theft that was taking place. Now, they make the argument that the reason that Zelensky went after Sapo and Abu had a lot to do with the fact that Sapo and Abu was investigating Zelensky himself. I mean, Zelensky's organization's inner circle. And when they realized that they were being investigated, he immediately turned around and said, they're Russian plants, they're Russian spies. And so now we have to have a police investigation against all of these people who are part of Nabu and Sapo. Now, the paper makes the point of saying that's not why he did it. It wasn't that they were infiltrated by the Russians. It was that they knew they had the goods on Zelensky. You have one guy who's a representative in the Rada who says there's $5 billion of cryptocurrency that they were effectively trying to use to buy a bank in France, and that the bank declined them for doing so. Basically, they're trying to get the money out of the country.
They're buying banks. Can you imagine that? Buying, not just laundering money, buying banks in France. That's for everybody. That's where your taxpayer dollar is. What are you paying for your from your salary for your to live a life in the United States? That's where taxpayer dollar is going. Just buying a bank. This is just to buy a bank. Regular.
I know, let that sink in, right?
This is how bad. Let the people to understand that if you want to continue this war and finance Zelensky to buy a bank, another bank, and whatever cocaine, please do so. Wave the flag and continue, or no, just shut up and have your mindset, or wave the flag to stop this war and make peace in Ukraine. That's where it has to be, to stop them getting this and let Zelensky face the consequences.
Well, apparently France didn't let them buy the bank, which again, I'm glad you highlighted that, because I don't want that to go by too fast for people to, reconcile. He tried to buy an entire bank. They tried to buy an entire bank. All right. The other one has to do with the money that was effectively going weekly to the UAE. I could have swore it was $5 million a week. I need to look it up. I'm going to look up the exact number on it. But either way, $5 million, $10 million a week that is effectively going into the UAE, basically money that his team is stuffing to the side, I suppose, for a rainy day, where he can effectively run with a briefcase full of money if things get rough. Dig into this for me. I mean, I know you were in a different government, but when you were there as one of the diplomats, corruption has been an issue with Ukraine for a while now. But was it this bad? Was it this extreme? Were they stealing money in this way?
First of all, I was there. I was advisor to the first deputy prime minister of Ukraine when they formed NABU. I was there when they were forming this NABU by the U.S. government, George Kent and Ambassador Pyatt, slamming down the throat this NABU organization, which was coordinated by the Department of Justice and the FBI. The corruption was bad in Ukraine before, but it wasn't this bad by people buying banks in the West. They could have bought banks in the Middle East somewhere, or whatever, or used a big bank, but never buying banks to money launder. So this is how bad it has become. And it became 10 times worse than under what Yanukovych, they had a coup against Yanukovych for. It became not even 100 times even worse than what happened under Yanukovych. It became 200 times more than it was under the Orange Revolution, the first coup that happened. But right now, there's no coup because the West is taking this time and going to make a moment to make their coup because regular people, revolutions don't happen by regular people. Yeah, the regular people are involved in it, but it's all been coordinated from outside. And I can add to you one before you ask a question that
Well,
I
I was
know,
going to
and
say $50 million. You were right. It was 50 million
yes,
a week.
and Yermak uh, had a consultation in Washington with his lobbyists that he's paying millions of dollars to the week they tried to close Nabu down because of the corruption scandal.
Right.
That and his lobbyists advised him, saying, "Yes, please do so," because right now Trump is going against the deep state, the FBI, the Department of Justice that was against him, the deep staters within the FBI and the Department of Justice. So the Nabu was formed by them. So it's going to be useful for you. You're going to win. And unfortunately, they didn't, and they lost in this fight because Nabu is there to control people like Zelensky. Nabu is a foreign agent body within the Ukraine government. I knew the first head of Nabu, Artem Sitnik. He personally told me that he is proud that he's working for the U.S. government and selling out classified information on the Ukraine government to the U.S. So this is what Nabu is for people to understand. That's also your taxpayer dollars because it was all formed from on U.S. money, and still is. And the salaries of agents of Nabu are around 10, 15,000 US dollars a month. Some of them
What?
are five.
Wait. Say that again. Did you say $10,000 to $15,000 a month?
Yes, some of them are 5,000, but that's the low rank, like low ranking. But 10, 15,000 dollars a month. The head of Nabu gets $40,000 a month. How much money do you get paid in the minimum wage in the United States? $12.50. That's for your
No,
salary.
no,
No,
750. Seven
no,
fifty
no.
an hour.
Wasn't that 12.50? I got paid 12.50
No, seven
when I was a
fifty an
student.
hour. The
Oh,
state may have a different
yeah,
minimum wage, but the federal government's minimum wage is like
that's
seven
that.
fifty an hour.
That's the federal government. Yeah, but I'm going to talk about even 12 and a half. I was a student. I was working in the United States. I was getting paid 12 and a half, and then I was working there as a manager in a restaurant. But still, and there you have people in Ukraine from your taxpayers' dollars are being paid these salaries in the government of Ukraine and being supported by this. The ministers of Ukraine government, which are still also being paid by the money which is sent from abroad to Ukraine, is getting paid $50,000 a month. The minister of energy, the minister of culture, etc. The head of the gas companies in Ukraine are getting paid a salary of $1 million a month. So this is what Ukraine is. There's a war, which are also being begged to finance and chip in and donate a dollar online, but at the same time you have the government officials of Ukraine living a life that the U.S. cannot even afford themselves. People in the United States, even a good businessman, cannot afford themselves. So this is what the reality is. So also think about before doing those donations and chipping in and thinking about supporting who and what. But I can tell you, you're Mac lost in this. Nabu was not only investigating, they were helping to build a RICO case in Washington against the Zelensky government by the FBI. They were tapping into Zelensky's and Mindich apartment, one of the oligarchs close to Zelensky who fled Ukraine, who I mentioned before. They tapped into his apartment and listened to all the conversations he had personally with Zelensky and how to launder all the money out of Ukraine. Boom, the chain. That's how this is, and it's being right now fed through Turkish paper, but it's a Western paper, so it's going to be a lot more coming out. And that's why I believe that there may be a coup in Ukraine sooner than later, which is trying to undermine these peace negotiations today.
Oh, so you think that's how they're going to get rid of Zelensky? Effectively, criminal charges against him, saying he's corrupt. He's corrupt. Look at all of these things.
RICO case in the United States, up to 20 years in prison.
Yeah, but Zelensky doesn't live in the United States. He lives in Ukraine.
United States, if United States builds a RICO case against him, he's wanted all over the world.
They're going to extradite him.
He
Wow.
cannot live anywhere in the Western world. He's not like he can go to Russia or to Venezuela or to China. No. He spit on China throughout this war. He made war with Russia and threatened Putin to kill him.
Can you imagine him going to Russia? Can you imagine him going to Russia?
I think he's going to go to prison in Russia also. He is a wanted man.
Yeah.
and will be a wanted man one day all over the globe.
One
Nobody's
last
going to
question.
keep him out
No,
there.
please,
He knows too much. That's the problem. He knows too much.
if Zelensky is deposed, which inevitably he will be because hashtag reasons, right? Will he be arrested in the same way he's been arresting his political opponents in Ukraine? I mean, Zelensky has put so many people in prison or chased them out of the country. At some point, will that shoe flip on him?
If there's going to be a real government coming to power, I think yes. If not, they're going to let him out of the country and then put him on a wanted list later on and use that against him.
Wow.
But if there's going to be a real government, a neutral government that is going to be agreed upon Moscow and Washington coming into Ukraine, building up elections, then this government should, and I hope so, he will be arrested and put on trial in front of millions of Ukrainians that he killed and put arrested and tortured. And not only him, but his surrounding and people around him that have to also face those consequences because they broke the law. They are the ones who are the collaborators of the West. They hold foreign passports. And because of those foreign passports, they sold out our country. They're trying to, the head of the security service of Ukraine was bragging about 2 days ago on how they have political cases against people I've been talking about collaborators with Russia and having life sentences. They're the ones who are collaborating together with the head of the security service with the United States and the British intelligence and the European intelligence against our own country. So they have to face trial and prison sentences by the law. I do hope so that will happen.
I have to get one last question in. Do you see the political pressures in Ukraine creating a fracture where, let's say, Banderites take Lvov, or where there is this kind of, I don't know, I guess, fight or so between elements of people who don't want to deal with these Banderites versus the Banderites themselves? Like, do you see this kind of political fracturing taking place in Ukraine over the
Not
pressure?
not yet, but it might be the case after this whole regime after it topples, and there's no coordination from to put somebody in place real fast. We might see internal civil wars happening within a couple months after the fall of the regime. And that might happen before a government takes in power. So Ukraine went through this 100 years ago again, as I said. After the toppling of the Russian Empire and in the beginning of the 20th century, Kiev had 20 revolutions during one day, sometimes. Can you imagine that? In a day, you had a regime change of 20 times. So today, this territory had faced these issues before. So hopefully, it will be we'll have less bloodshed, faster government that can take in power. The faster Russia and the United States makes a deal, the faster the United States leaves Ukraine, the faster real Ukraine, will make a deal with Russia and start living a normal life, the easier it will be for us to stop the Banderites and all these radicals from trying to do civil wars on our ground and killing more and more people. So this is what the reality is. And I hope Trump and his administration will make a right choice. And I'm praying for that because I supported Trump and I still do because he is the only one who actually spoke about peace. And I do hope that he will, speaking about it, he'll make with actions and bring peace to my homeland.
Andrii, thank you for this. Honestly, compelling conversation. It really is. Andrii Telizhenko, he is a Ukrainian whistleblower, former diplomat. You have my deepest appreciation, man. You be safe, okay?
Thank you, Jamal. All the best to you and all the best to your viewers and listeners. God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.